My son Daniel was 9 when everything started to change. I kept pretending everything was fine for his sake and hoped somehow things would go back to how they were. That night we sat down to dinner like usual. Daniel was swinging his legs under the table poking at his peas with his fork. He looked up at me and asked why isn't Mom home yet. I told him she was working late but said it too quickly and he muttered she's always working late now. I smiled but it didn't reach my eyes. He saw right through me. Kids always do. Before this she never missed dinner. We always ate together. Now it was just the two of us, me and Daniel. Microwaved meals, awkward silences and excuses. I kept telling myself it was just a rough patch. Work was hard. Life was hard. But deep down I knew something was breaking. That same night I went to check on Daniel before bed. He was sitting quietly at the table coloring. No complaints, no questions, just focused like he was trying to disappear into his crayons. I wanted to hold him, tell him everything would be okay but I didn't have the words. I just sat beside him silently wishing I could fix this. Before I lay down to sleep I heard her phone buzz late at night. She said she was working but I knew work didn't keep her awake like this. The silence between us was growing thicker and heavier every day. I lay awake thinking about what I had lost and what I still needed to protect Daniel from but didn't know how. That night marked the beginning of a long slow unraveling of everything I thought we had. The first real clue came from Daniel one night when he was brushing his teeth. Foam covered his mouth as he looked up and asked why does Mom smile at her phone more than she smiles at us. I laughed and said probably funny cat videos but he didn't smile back. He just shrugged and said she smiled at it in the car today and then she put on lipstick to pick up groceries. I tried to ignore it, pretend it meant nothing but a heaviness settled deep inside me, not suspicion yet just a dull ache like something was wrong, something I couldn't name yet but felt in every quiet moment when she wasn't around or when her attention was elsewhere. I watched Daniel closely after that day, trying to catch what he saw in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. He started to grow quieter and more distant, like he was protecting himself from something I wasn't ready to face. The way she looked at her phone was different now, like it held a secret that didn't include us. It was the beginning of a slow fading away that no one wanted to admit, but all of us felt. The house felt colder in the evenings and I realized that I was losing more than just my wife. I was losing the family I thought we had. Daniel spent an hour one afternoon drawing a birthday card for her. He drew the three of us at the lake in a boat. She wore a sun hat, the sun was shining and everything looked peaceful. When she came home Daniel ran up to her with the card in both hands. She smiled but barely looked at the drawing. "Thank you baby, so sweet," she said and slipped the card into her purse without opening it. Then her phone buzzed. She walked away to answer it. In the hallway Daniel stood there holding the cap of his marker. Without saying a word I saw something crack inside him and it broke something inside me too. That small moment said everything about what was happening behind closed doors. I wanted to scream or ask her why but the words got stuck in my throat. Instead I hugged Daniel tight and promised silently I would protect him from whatever was coming. I didn't know how yet but I would try. I woke up around 2 in the morning. Her side of the bed was empty again. I followed the faint light to the kitchen where she sat with her phone in hand, smiling softly. She didn't notice me typing fast, pausing, deleting and typing again, then laughing quietly before sending the message. I stepped back, laid down and closed my eyes but sleep didn't come. I just lay there listening to the silence growing thicker between us, wondering what I had lost without knowing exactly when it slipped away. The next morning she acted like nothing had happened but I saw it in her eyes, the secret that wasn't meant for me. I wanted to ask but the words felt too heavy, like opening a door to a room I wasn't ready to enter. Meanwhile Daniel was getting quieter too. Sometimes he would stare at his phone waiting for her call but it rarely came. Those small cracks grew wider every day and I realized we were drifting apart in ways no one wanted to admit. I started to wonder if there was a way back or if we were already too far gone. Sunday was laundry day and I was sorting through the clothes, hers, mine and Daniel's, when I found a sock that didn't belong to either of us. Black, long and made from expensive material, definitely a man's sock, not from this house. I held it looking for answers but all I found was silence. I wanted to ask her but something inside me stopped me, maybe fear, maybe resignation. I dropped the sock back into the basket and said nothing but the weight of that single piece of fabric settled over me like a dark cloud I started to notice little things more: the secret calls, the hidden texts, the way she avoided my eyes when I asked simple questions. The house felt less like home and more like a place where a story was ending slowly and painfully. Daniel didn't seem to notice yet, or maybe he was too young to understand, but I knew he was watching and learning from every quiet moment, every silence, every glance that spoke more than words ever could. Daniel's birthday was coming up. He was turning 9 and had been talking about it for weeks, asking if we could all go to the lake like last year, just the 3 of us like before. She smiled, told him yes, kissed his forehead and promised it would be special. I wanted to believe her so badly. I offered to take the day off work to make it all about him. I even ordered a fishing rod for him like the one I had when I was a boy, but 2 days before the birthday I overheard her talking on the phone. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the tone of her voice caught me, soft, tender, then a giggle. I hadn't heard from her in months. She whispered something about that weekend and can't wait, and when she saw me standing there she froze, phone still to her ear. I didn't ask, I just nodded and walked away. The morning of Daniel's birthday she said she had a headache, told us to go without her, said she needed rest. I didn't fight it because by then I knew the truth, or enough of it. Daniel asked if she'd come later. I said maybe. He smiled, packed his little bag, and we left. Just as 2 by the lake he seemed quieter than usual, catching nothing but still laughing at my awful jokes. We ate sandwiches, watched the sky change color, and for a few hours I forgot the pain. That night while he slept in the tent I sat by the fire thinking about how a family breaks not with one big moment but in slow tiny cracks that grow without notice until everything caves in. A few nights later I couldn't stop myself. I waited until she was asleep and took her phone. I knew it was wrong. I felt sick even as I did it, but I needed the truth. I needed it plain and cold, not dressed in silence. I wasn't prepared for what I found. Photos I didn't recognize, places we'd never been, and messages, dozens of them, full of words she never used with me. Warm, short, honest. They joked, they planned weekends. He called her our little escape. She said she felt alive again. My hands were shaking, but my heart was strangely still. I didn't feel rage, not even betrayal, just a cold, quiet sadness that filled every inch of me like water in a sinking boat. I put the phone back gently, sat on the edge of the bed and watched her sleep for a long time. She looked peaceful, young, like before Daniel was born, before bills and fights and slow silences turned love into routine. I realized then that maybe she wasn't mine anymore. Maybe she hadn't been for a while and I just hadn't wanted to see it. A few days after that night, I took down the old photo of us by the fireplace, the one from our 5th anniversary. We looked so happy in it, frozen in time. Her head resting on my shoulder, Daniel just a baby in her arms, both of us smiling without effort. I held the frame for a long time, staring into those eyes that used to see only me. Something shifted in my grip, and the glass cracked down the middle. I didn't drop it. It just cracked. Like the pressure had built too long, even in the wood and glass. I didn't throw it out. I just laid it face down in a drawer and closed it gently. That day, Daniel came home from school with a painting. 3 figures, again. But this time, the woman was half faded, like she wasn't fully there. I asked if he wanted to talk. He said no. Just that he missed how things used to be. I hugged him. We didn't say anything else. Some truths don't come with easy words, and kids know more than we think. He was starting to understand, in his own quiet way. The moment I found the motel receipt was almost absurd. I was cleaning out the car, just something to do to keep busy, and it fluttered out from under the passenger seat. Not a name I recognized, but a local motel. The date matched the day of Daniel's birthday. The same day she claimed to be sick in bed. I stared at the small slip of paper like it was a knife. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, letting the truth settle on me like dust. I didn't confront her right away. I hid the receipt in my wallet and carried it around for 3 days. It felt heavier than money. Heavier than guilt. I watched her closely in those days. The way she smiled at dinner. The small talk. The hollow laughter. And I realized something even worse than betrayal: she didn't feel guilty. She was already gone. Her body was here, but her soul had moved on. Daniel was the only reason I hadn't packed a bag and left. Not because I was afraid, but because I couldn't abandon him the way she was slowly abandoning both of us. The house became a theater of small silences. Every noise echoed longer than it should have. The ticking of the kitchen clock, the hum of the fridge, Daniel's soft footsteps in the hallway, they all filled the space that used to be laughter and warmth. She and I spoke in practicalities now. Who picks up Daniel? What to buy for dinner? Which bills were due? Her voice was calm, almost cheerful, like nothing was wrong. But behind her smile was distance, and behind her eyes, someone else's name. I began to take Daniel out more often. Long drives. Parks. Ice cream on school nights. I think he knew something was breaking, but I was trying to show him that not everything falls apart. That love doesn't leave even when people do. One night, while driving home, he asked me, "Why doesn't Mom laugh anymore?" I didn't answer. I couldn't lie to him. Instead, I pulled the car over, hugged him, and just said, "I'm still here." He didn't ask again. At night, I'd lie awake while she slept next to me. The same body, the same breath, but everything else felt foreign. I waited for a sign, a confession, a fight, anything real. But all I got was silence, soft and unbearable. It happened on a Wednesday night. I couldn't hold it anymore. I sat her down, no anger, just calm. That kind of calm that only comes after too many sleepless nights. I showed her the motel receipt. Her eyes widened for a second, not in shock, but in recognition. Then she looked away. I asked, "Do you love him?" She didn't speak. Just stared at the floor. I asked again, quieter. "Do you love him more than us?" She blinked, swallowed, and whispered, "It's different." Different. Not better, not worse. Just different. Like we were furniture, and she wanted new walls. I asked why she stayed. She said she didn't want to hurt Daniel. I almost laughed. As if staying and pretending wasn't already doing that. I told her I knew about the messages. About the nights. About everything. She cried then. The kind of tears that feel more like guilt than regret. I didn't touch her. I didn't say it would be okay. Because it wouldn't. We both knew that now. I slept on the couch that night. Daniel came out around midnight and curled up beside me without a word. I didn't ask how he knew. I just held him, tighter than I ever had before. Daniel stopped talking about Mom as much as he used to. At first, I thought it was just the natural quiet of a growing boy, but it was more than that. His eyes would flicker with sadness whenever her name came up, and sometimes, he'd just walk away when I tried to ask how he felt. One evening, after dinner, he drew a picture, 2 figures on a bench, a man and a boy, and a third figure barely sketched in the background, almost invisible. When I asked about it, he said softly, "Mom doesn't like sitting with us anymore." His voice was calm but carried a weight no 9-year-old should carry. I didn't know how to answer him. So, I just nodded and promised myself to be stronger for him, to fill the silence she left behind with love and presence. Days turned into weeks, and the house remained heavy with unspoken truths. I realized staying in this fragile balance wasn't fair to Daniel or to myself. One rainy afternoon, I sat down with him and said, "Son, I'm going to make some changes. Things need to be better for you and for me." He looked up, eyes wide and searching. I told him that sometimes adults make mistakes, but what matters is how we fix them. I promised that no matter what, I would be there for him, always. It was the hardest conversation I've ever had, but also the beginning of a new chapter, one where honesty mattered more than pretending. I started planning how to rebuild our lives, piece by piece, starting with protecting Daniel from the pain I couldn't erase. After that conversation with Daniel, I knew I couldn't just wait for things to fix themselves. I started making small changes, spending more time with him, helping with homework, going to his soccer games. Every smile he gave me felt like a tiny victory against the darkness that had settled in our home. But at night, when he was asleep, the weight of what was happening pressed down harder. I began to talk to her more directly, asking for honesty, for clarity. Some days she gave me silence, other days a glance that said she was sorry but too lost to come back. I realized that healing wouldn't come from waiting, it would come from facing the hard truth together or apart. I didn't know which yet, but I knew running away wasn't an option. One evening, she sat down with me and Daniel for the first time in months. No phones, no distractions, just the three of us at the dinner table. She apologized for everything, not with empty words but with tears and a promise to try. Daniel smiled shyly and asked if we could all go fishing like we used to. For a moment, I saw the family I thought I'd lost. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was there. That night, I went to bed with a cautious hope, maybe some cracks could be mended, maybe love could be stronger than betrayal. But deep inside, I knew that whatever happened next would change us forever. Days passed, and even though she tried, the distance between us was still there like an invisible wall. We shared the same roof but lived in different worlds. Daniel was caught in the middle, trying to smile and pretend that everything was okay when it wasn't. I noticed how he watched her from across the room, eyes full of questions he was too young to ask. She was quieter too, often lost in her own thoughts, like a ghost moving through the house. The dinners together became fewer, and the laughter almost disappeared. Sometimes, late at night, I caught myself reaching for her hand, but the silence between us was louder than words. I realized healing would take more time than I hoped, and maybe love wasn't enough on its own. It was a cold, rainy evening when she finally broke down and confessed everything. I was sitting on the worn-out couch, Daniel asleep upstairs, and she looked at me with eyes full of shame and sorrow. She told me about the loneliness that had wrapped itself around her heart, the excitement that once sparked in her life slowly dying, and the desperate need for something, anything, to feel alive again. She admitted to meeting someone else, a man who gave her the attention and passion she thought shared. Lost somewhere in the routine of our days, her voice trembled as she spoke, like every word was a wound reopening. I listened, not with anger or bitterness, but with a deep exhaustion and sadness that had been building inside me for months. I wanted to ask why, to demand reasons, but instead I stayed quiet. Letting her words fill the heavy silence between us, she said she didn't love me the way she used to, and maybe she never did anymore, or maybe she only thought she did. I asked her what she wanted now, and she said she didn't know. The truth was raw and jagged, cutting through the fragile fabric of our marriage like a blade. I told her that we needed honesty, brutal and complete, because the lies were killing us slowly. In the darkness of that night, I felt the last threads of what was left in us fray. But I also knew that without truth there could be no healing. I wasn't sure if we could fix this, but I knew we had to face it together or break apart completely. After her confession, the atmosphere in the house shifted into something colder, heavier. We were two people living under the same roof but drifting further apart every day. Daniel felt it more than anyone. His questions about Mom stopped and the sparkle in his eyes faded as he watched our family unravel. She retreated into herself, spending nights away or locked in her room, avoiding every attempt I made to reach her. The silence between us was like a growing chasm that swallowed all warmth and hope. I stopped pretending I could wait for a miracle or that time would heal the wounds. I was angry at her, but more than that I was broken. The man she had found was no secret anymore, and every message, every missed call, every small lie was a fresh wound in my heart. I tried to be strong for Daniel, but inside I was crumbling. The house felt like a prison where love was slowly suffocating. One night, after weeks of unbearable tension, I sat her down and laid it all out. No more secrets, no more lies. I told her the family was on the edge and that she had to make a choice, fight for us honestly and completely, or leave before everything was destroyed. I looked into her eyes and told her this was her last chance. She begged for time, for understanding. I told her time was over, the damage was deep and the bridge between us fragile, but if she wanted back in, it had to be with full truth and commitment. No half measures, no empty promises. The weight of the moment crushed us both, and for the first time in months I saw a flicker of something real in her eyes. She promised to change, but the very next week I found messages on her phone again. I saw the same motel name, the same secret meetups. The betrayal hit me harder than I thought possible, like a punch to the gut that knocked the air out of my lungs. I realized words were worthless now. She wasn't just breaking promises, she was breaking us. Daniel's pain became unbearable and I couldn't let it continue. I confronted her that night, the anger and hurt spilling out in a torrent. She cried, begged, but I knew forgiveness wasn't something I could give this time, not yet. I told her she had crossed a line, there was no turning back without real consequences. I felt like a man losing everything he held dear, and the weight of that loss settled over me like a storm. I promised myself that no matter what happened, I would protect Daniel from this destruction. The next morning I told her she had to leave, at least for a while, to give us both space to heal and to decide what came next. She packed her things silently. Daniel watched from the doorway with wide eyes but said nothing. I saw relief mixed with sadness in him, as if part of him knew this was necessary but heartbreaking. The house felt empty and hollow, but finally, it was safe. For the first time in months I stayed up that night holding Daniel close, feeling the fragile weight of hope returning. Slowly, the hardest part was not the loneliness but the broken trust. The question of whether we could ever rebuild what was lost lingered like a shadow over every step we took forward. Her leaving didn't erase the pain, it left scars deeper than I expected. Daniel's questions came at night. Why did Mom leave? Will she come back? I struggled to answer without breaking down myself. I promised him she loved him, but sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and do things that hurt. The nights were the hardest part, the silence filled with memories and what ifs. I fought to keep strong for Daniel, but sometimes I broke too. The wounds were raw and healing was slow, but I refused to let the past define us. I cut off all contact with her to protect the fragile peace we had just begun to build. The future felt uncertain, but it was ours to shape. Months passed, and slowly, Daniel and I began to rebuild our lives. Each day was a small victory, his laughter returning like fragile light through a cracked window. I made sure to be present, to fill the silence with warmth and honesty. We took walks in the park, played games, and talked about dreams for the future, things simple but real. I saw hope in his eyes again, a quiet strength growing that made me believe we could move beyond the pain. Still, some nights were hard, memories creeping in like shadows. But with every sunrise, I promised myself and Daniel that we would keep moving forward, no matter how slow the steps. I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about her, it was about freeing myself from bitterness that could consume me. I forgave her in my heart, not to forget but to heal, to reclaim peace for Daniel and me. The pain shaped us but did not define us. I found strength I didn't know I had, the strength to be a better father, to rebuild trust where it mattered most. Together, Daniel and I created new memories, new traditions, a new kind of family, one grounded in truth and love. The scars remained, but they were reminders of survival, not defeat. The sun rose on a life reborn. Daniel smiled freely again, and I felt a peace I hadn't known for years. We were broken but unbowed, ready to face whatever came next together. The past was a shadow behind us, the future ours to write. I didn't know what the next chapter held, whether she would ever return or what it meant, but I knew that no matter what, I would protect Daniel and cherish every moment of our renewed bond. Sometimes the hardest endings make way for the strongest beginnings. After months of turmoil, the house finally settled into a quiet peace, not the warmth we once knew, but a calm acceptance. She stopped calling. She stopped coming. The space she left was heavy but honest. I realized that sometimes love means letting go, even when it shatters you inside. Daniel and I built our life on the ashes of broken promises, learning to trust again, to laugh again, to simply be together without fear or pain. The betrayal had taken much, but it couldn't steal the bond between father and son. From all this, I learned that marriage isn't just about love, it's about truth, respect, and loyalty. When those break, the cracks run deep. But even in loss, there's a lesson: protect what matters most. For me, that was Daniel. His innocence, his hope, his future. I understood that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not the person who hurt you. And that sometimes, the strongest love is the one that saves you by letting go. Life doesn't always give second chances to everyone. But it always gives us a chance to rise. Daniel and I are still healing. We still carry scars. But every day is a choice, to hold on to the pain or to choose hope. I choose hope. For him, for me, for the future we'll build together. The past will always be there, a reminder of what we survived. But it won't define us. We are more than the sum of our wounds. We are a new beginning. Looking back, I see how fragile life can be and how strong we must become when it breaks. My son taught me resilience and unconditional love. He showed me that even after the darkest nights, the dawn comes. This story is not just about betrayal or pain, it's about survival, growth, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his child. No matter what storms come, I will always stand for Daniel. Because love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. And every day, I choose him. Some nights the silence was louder than any argument could ever be. I'd sit beside Daniel as he slept, watching the rise and fall of his small chest, feeling the heaviness of everything we had lost. The pain wasn't just mine, it was his too, buried deep beneath his quiet demeanor. I wanted to shield him, to take away his sorrow, but all I could do was be present, to hold his hand when he needed it and to tell him, without words, that he was never alone. Those moments taught me the power of quiet love, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Healing wasn't a straight path. Some days felt like progress, others like stepping backward. But through it all, I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. I had to be brave not just for myself but for Daniel, to show him that even broken hearts can mend, that pain can become strength. Together we found small joys, a joke shared, a sunset watched, a game played, and those moments became the stitches sewing us back together. It was messy, imperfect, but real. The hardest lesson was that truth, no matter how painful, is the foundation of any real healing. The lies had corroded our family, but facing the truth gave us a chance to rebuild. I learned that forgiveness starts with honesty, with facing the darkness instead of hiding from it. It wasn't about excusing betrayal but understanding it enough to move past it. This truth set us free. It let Daniel and me start to dream again, cautiously but sincerely, of a future not haunted by the past. What remained unshaken through all this was the bond between father and son. No betrayal, no absence, no broken promises could undo that. Daniel and I discovered a strength within ourselves, a love fierce and enduring. It was a love built on presence, protection, and endless patience. Every challenge deepened it, every tear shed only made it stronger. I realized then that family isn't always about who stays but about who shows up when it matters most. And I promised to always show up for Daniel. Life will never be perfect again, and maybe it never was. But what matters is what we do with the pieces we have left. I choose to hold on to hope to build a life where honesty, respect, and love guide us. My son is my greatest teacher and my greatest reason to keep going. We will carry scars but not chains. This story is one of survival, of resilience, and of the quiet power of a father's love. No matter what storms we face next, I know we will face them together, stronger, wiser, unbroken.